Hello everyone, welcome to the YouTube channel of Government Lohia College Churu. I am Dr. Sunita Meena, Assistant Professor English. Today we are going to discuss a detailed chapter-wise summary of the Poetics. Earlier we have discussed the introduction of the Poetics. Now first chapter of the Poetics, in which Aristotle introduces the theory of imitation. Aristotle did not invent the term imitation. Plato was the first to use the word in connection with poetry, but Aristotle breathed into a new and definite meaning, so that poetic imitation is no longer considered mere mimicry, a mere act of blind copying, but is regarded as an act of imaginative creation. In Aristotle's view, imitation is not a blind copying, it is an imaginative creation. It is an act of imaginative creation. He says that all arts are a mode of imitation. In Aristotle's view, it is the principle of imitation which unites poetry with the other fine arts. Imitation is the common basis of all the fine arts, and it is this fact of imitation which differentiates the fine arts from the other category of arts, that is the useful arts. While Plato had equated poetry with painting, Aristotle equates it with music. In his view, imitation is no longer remains a mere blind representation of the surface or the appearance of things, but in his theory it becomes a representation of the passions and emotions of man, which are also imitated by music. So Aristotle, by his theory, enlarged the scope of imitation. The poet imitates not the surface of things, but the higher reality embedded within. As the emotions are also the objects of imitation of music, poetry has close affinities, close relations with music. It is a mistake to compare poetry with painting as Plato. Plato compared poetry with painting. It was his mistake. While Aristotle says that poetry is more akin to music. In the very first chapter of the Poetics, Aristotle says epic poetry and tragedy, comedy, also and dithyrambic poetry. Dithyrambic means it was a hymn in praise of Dionysus. Dionysus, the god of wine and drinking. So Aristotle says that epic poetry and tragedy, comedy, and also and dithyrambic poetry is also the music of the flute and the lyre in most of their forms are in their general conception modes of imitation. These are the kinds of imitation. He says that they differ, however, from one another in three respects: their medium, the objects, the manner or mode of imitation. Thus, the medium of the poet and the painter are different. According to Aristotle, the medium of the poet and the painter are different. The one imitates through form and color, and the other through language, rhythm, and harmony. The musician imitates through rhythm and harmony, In this way, poetry is nearer to music than painting. Further, the manner of a poet may be purely narrative, as in the epic, or representation through action, as in drama. Thus, different kinds of poetry differ from each other in their manner of imitation. Aristotle further states that imitation, not meter, is the test of poetry. He says that the art which imitates by means of language, whether written in prose or in verse, has hitherto been without a name. For instance, there is no common term which could be applied to the mimes. Mimes means prose works of Saffron and the dialogues written by Socrates. He further states that the term maker or poet has certainly been used for one who writes in meter, but it is not realized that it is the imitation which makes a poet, not the use of meter or verse which makes a poet. Even when a book on medicine or natural science is written in verse, the name of poet is by custom given to the author. But this custom is totally unjustified. Homer and Empedocles have nothing in common so far as their subject matter is concerned. But as they both write in meter, they are both regarded as poets. In actual fact, it is only Homer who can be called a poet, while Empedocles is a physicist rather than a poet. So, what Aristotle wants to say that meter is not the test of poetry. Imitation is the real test of a poetry.